One. Hi everyone, it's another journey, and today's journey is a forgiveness specialist and advocate, speaker, workshop leader, global peace visionary, award-winning and best-selling author of Forgiveness Made Easy, the revolutionary guide for moving beyond your past and truly letting go. She has over 30 years experience in personal and spiritual development as a mentor, coach and group facilitator. She leads online forgiveness-filled workshops and courses on mental and emotional well-being, and she works in a private practice internationally on bespoke retreats in rural Somerset in the UK. Our guest is also a musician and singer-songwriter and has recorded several CD albums and singles, including a song for international peace. A new album, Wake Up as One, is currently being released as a series of singles throughout 2025. I welcome Barbara to the journey.
Thanks very much, David.
You're welcome. And it's good to hear, and I'm not being biased because I'm British, it's good to hear someone from my side of the pond, even though I'm on the other side of the pond.
Yeah. Yes.
Now,
In fact, somebody thought I was Australian the other day.
well,
Anyway.
original. And that's not being disrespectful against Australians. I know Australians do sound like British, but they sound more g'day and more down in their voice. With the British voice, it's more up a bit.
Mhm.
So journeys begin, and journeys begin obviously at a young age. You get inspired by a as a young person, by someone in your life. But can you tell us your earliest memories that kick-started your journey?
Well, I think there are a few people who I knew around sort of age 15 who I found interesting. And one of the books that they were reading was called Jonathan Livingston's Seagull by Richard Bach. And that book, I think, opened my mind to other possibilities. And I think probably from then on, I was interested in asking the deeper questions about life.
Mm,
And also around that time, my mum became quite ill. She had multiple sclerosis from when I was about 15. And so suddenly you're plunged into this situation where you're having to take care of a parent when you're still a teenager, and that thing makes things quite complicated. And so the story continues, through my sort of 20s, and I'm still interested in personal and spiritual development. I'm still reading lots of books, and I'm still, writing songs about my life and my
mm,
inner life. And then I went to a personal development training course over one long weekend, and we were invited to think about the people that we held grievances against. And I thought, well, probably everyone I've ever met, just to a lesser extent. Not that I'm the most resentful person in the world, but I just thought, yeah, there's been players in my life who haven't done the things I've wanted them to do, and so I got interested at that point. And when I got on my list, I started writing a list of people that I was holding a grievance against, big and small. And I got to number 36, and I put down my mum's name. And that was significant because I didn't really realize that I'd been holding a grievance against her for all that time, for being ill. And
mm,
whenever we think about the big questions like forgiveness and when is it appropriate and when is it not, a lot of the time the subject matter is quite dire things that happen. And I'm not underestimating how dire it is when somebody is ill in your family. But the kind of more shocking things that happen in the external world, like a a murder or a sort of a tragic loss or an accident, you don't think so much about your own personal life, like the smaller things. And so that really was what was inspiring me to then go deeper into the subject of forgiveness. And then I had the happy experience of working on a retreat for 7 years. And we would take clients through a very deep kind of emotional journey, as well as doing cleansing and juice fasting. So they were taking care of their bodies on every level. And I was really curious about why some of the clients would be able to forgive things and other clients would really have a difficult time. And so then I realized I had a lot to say about that, and I was really interested in what gets in our way. And that's why I ended up writing my book, was to try and clear as many of the obstacles out of the way, so that if someone does want to forgive, and not everyone does, but if
mm.
someone does want to forgive, that there's a way that helps them to get through the obstacles and then a way of doing it.
Yeah, because forgiving so many people, because it can be like one person, could be five people, it could be 100 people. It can be difficult, but then it's about understanding why you want to forgive them, because it's not always the automatic first thing that comes into your mind.
No, no, not at all. In fact, the first thing that comes into your mind is usually revenge, or how to overcome the pain that you've experienced. So I think if something difficult happens, even in the circumstance of my mum, it was more really about what I did, which was I closed down my heart. I used to wear a little badge when I was at university that said je ne regrette rien, like and I didn't cry for 7 years. So that was how I coped with it. I toughened up and I didn't let myself access my feelings. But then
Mm.
obviously there's the downside of that. And so I think what happens when you start looking on a deeper level about what's actually going on inside of yourself, you can untangle the mind and the heart. And that's really what my one-to-one work is with people.
Yeah. And I just, find that empowering in such a way because, I've been there and I am still there in the sense of trying to forgive certain people in my life because of what's happened in my life.
Yeah.
Like I trying to forgive you say about your mother, and I'm not saying this against my mum, but I'm trying to forgive my mum for the way she acts towards me. But at the same time, I know it won't change dramatically. Yes, I can forgive her up to the point I say forgive her, I still love her. But the ultimate forgiveness is actually being able to say sorry to her face to face. But I know I won't. So I just have to accept where I've reached for that. But at the same time, it's left my emotions very raw, where I feel like I've bottled up a lot of emotion. I don't, like you said, didn't cry. I don't cry. I just show anger and frustration. And that's not the emotion to have when you're trying to forgive people or even trying to be somewhere in life because it will hold you back a lot.
Yeah. Although you do need to acknowledge the pain. And so
Mm,
sometimes you do need to acknowledge the anger. And a lot of what I do when I work with people, especially when we do the mother work, is to let them say ouch, to let them say you didn't do this, even though you tried and even though you were doing the best you could, and even though, like, because we're a lot of the time we're quite generous and we don't want to upset, but we want to be able to acknowledge the impact that things happened and what happened to us. Because like even in the case of my mum being ill, that wasn't all of my relationship with her. There were things that she did and the way she treated, she seemed to favor my brother, and and she had the most difficulty with my sister, and so there was all those kind of complicated family dynamics in there. But it is a question of honoring the feelings. And I think what happens when there are difficulties in our relationships, the feelings that we have, they're kind of like waves, and they should be able to just resolve. If we stay with them, we feel them, and then they pass through our systems. And
mm,
that's what happens chemically, with the the actual responses, like the cortisol response, things like they come through our bodies and then they resolve. If you keep a resentment going, it's like you keep that wave going. And the resentment, the root of the word comes from sentir, which is Latin for feel. So you're re-feeling those feelings over and over again. So although they may be at a low level, most of the time we're not necessarily thinking about our upbringing, but every now and then something in our current lives will nudge us back to, oh, this is something that's not fully resolved. And so part of what I do with my clients is working in a way so that you're taking away as much of this, a bit like the outer shell of things. So you want to take as much of that away so that you're just left with the little bit of the seed inside, so that you can attend to that. And all of the protection and the kind of reactive responses is something that you can deal with in order to lessen the pain that you're carrying. Because when we carry resentments, we're holding that in our hearts. It's on our minds. We're waking up in the morning thinking about person, and it's kind of going round and round in our energy systems.
Yeah.
And so the reason for doing, and I call it work, forgiveness work, because it is a bit like any other kind of workout, and we take our bins out every week, or every 2 weeks. We take our bodies, to the doctor or to the gym or to the dentist, but we don't take our hearts anywhere. I mean, we might, moan to a friend, but we don't really, and you might have a therapist as well, but tending to the kind of subtler areas of the heart, I think, doesn't often get done. And so that's really what my work is about, is to spread the happy news that forgiveness is one of the most effective mental health practices that you can do. Because if you imagine that you're holding on to all of this resentment and it's all kind of like piling up in your heart, and you're gathering all these stories, that you're going to have to carry that
Mm.
right to your deathbed, unless okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to release my ill will against that person. Because of course, even when something bad's happened and you're holding your resentment, it doesn't change the thing. I can hold on to this, or I can let it go, and the bad thing still happened. It's just, am I going to add extra pain to myself, or I'm going to try and minimize the amount of pain that I'm carrying?
Yeah, and it does go into the factor as well. It doesn't have to be automatically your parent or parents or someone in your family. It can be a partner too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I know for a fact that when you do have that situations in your partner, that's where you do go to seek out for it. But it's a lot more difficult, and I'm not saying it's a cause of all divorces, but that's where problems do occur in divorces, because that you don't amicably talk about things, you have that resentment. Now, if you talk about the methods that you want practicing in a divorce situation, I don't think divorce would be an issue. I just think it's just how people address things and how people approach things in the honest way without being bitter.
Yeah. Yeah. And often what happens when you're going through a divorce is all of the unhealed early stuff comes up. Because if you think about it, our parents are our first blueprint of relationship. So it's worth doing the work, because it helps to free you. And also, if you are divorcing, it makes sense to release all of that bad feeling, especially if you've got children together, because you might need to continue to co-parent. But
Mm,
also it means that you're then free to enter into your next relationship without dragging this whole kind of pile of resentment of your ex, which kind of leaks out. And there may be things that we mistrust the new partner because we didn't finish doing our work on the previous one.
yeah. And it's just about building from what you know, how you can be stronger, how you can be more efficient in being, saying, I can beat this. And, there's times where people in life, and I'm saying this from my experience as well, where you feel bad because you wish you could have changed things, but you can't change the past. Yes, you can accept it's happened. Yes, you can talk about it. Yes, if you got a good partner and it ended on good terms, you can work on it and talk about it. But if you feel like you're being blocked and not being able to speak, you've got to have that voice yourself to be stronger to say, I can talk.
Yeah. And that's why the way that I do the processes when I work with people is it's like an imaginary um, active imagination process. So it's a Jungian sort of NLP kind of based modality where you're closing your eyes and you're imagining having the conversations that you might not have been able to have with that person. And there's
Mm,
several different kind of parts to it. So again, all of which help you to get to the point where you actually want to let it go. It's like you realize this is not serving me in any way. And it's really important what you've just said, though, David, because sometimes there are things that never get expressed. And so it does that thing with this emotional thing. It's like there are things that need to be expressed or feelings to be felt, and then they just wait. And they will wait decades if they have to.
mm,
And so it's like we have this kind of inner sort of, I don't know, I think we're watching all the time about what happens and what doesn't happen, and when somebody does something bad to you, it's like it disturbs the scales of what we think is fair, even though it's ridiculous to
mm.
expect anything to be fair. After you're 7, you need to give that one up, but we still have that. And so we either want to bring the other person down to our level, so we that's when we want things like revenge, or the idea of just being able to just experience this pain and not do anything about it seems so unfamiliar and so unlikely that we just wait. So we kind of go into this sense of and don't do anything. And that's why doing these kinds of inner journey, it literally is like some of the training I did was called the journey.
Mm.
And it's a way of working through these processes. It's working through this kind of material, and you do it on the inner realm, because sometimes, like you said, the other partner, your other half, might not be willing to have that conversation with you, or the other person, or your parent might not may no longer be alive.
Mm.
What do you do if somebody's died and then you haven't had that final conversation, or if somebody dies suddenly, or if they take their own life, or there's some kind of I worked with one woman whose brother, he said he was fine that night, and then he ended up in a motorcycle accident, and then he was in a coma, and then he died. So she never got the chance to have that final conversation with him until we did the work, and then she had the opportunity to do that. So
Mm.
it's incredibly healing, because I think, like I said, it's like we want that resolution, we want to come back to wholeness, we want the feelings to feel like they've resolved, we want the things that need to be said to be expressed, and that's when we can reclaim our equanimity and our peace of mind.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So obviously people be wanting to know how can I get in contact with you? Is there any advice you can give or how to get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So everything's on my website, and it's forgivenessmadeeasy.co.uk. So .co.uk. Um, and and there's like all the information about the online classes that I lead, and then getting in touch to work with me one to one. That's all there, and my book, and I also have lots of little videos and stuff about forgiveness in general. And
Okay.
in terms of advice, um, I mean, sometimes this can be a very contentious issue. And I think one of the most important things is to say that you don't ever have to forgive. It's not an essential thing. Some people feel like there's been too much pain, and then
Mhm.
because we're quite good at fooling ourselves and thinking that that's not there anymore. So it's important that we're gentle with ourselves, give ourselves time, with no sense of insistence. And of course sometimes there really are things that people would call unforgivable, like murder or abuse, or like there are things that are wrong that
Mm.
but still the point is that you don't want to add to your injury by carrying the resentment against the other person, because that isn't going to help. But doing your work and coming to a place of equanimity within yourself will help you. And then maybe there are things that need to happen. Maybe you do need to litigate. Maybe you need to divorce. Maybe you need to, you know, take steps to do something about the situation. But that's sort of secondary. And but always it's like you always wake up with you. And so you want to be clear about what you're carrying in your heart. And like I said, with the bins example, you don't collect all the rubbish in the kitchen and leave it there. And then it goes off, and then, and then you work around it and, like cook in a corner,
Hmm.
we take it out. And that's the equivalent of what we're trying to do here, is on the emotional level. So it's
Yeah.
mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah. Now, a thing that caught my eye, and I like this a lot because it's right behind you now, is your fire extinguisher.
Yeah. Love and peace, or
Uh,
peace and love.
What
Yeah.
was the inspiration of making that?
Well, I didn't make it, actually. It was a gift from a friend, and her brother made it for me, just because it needs to be spread through the world. I mean, we are hopeless as human beings about doing this essential piece of work. And if you, doesn't matter where you go, if you look in the world where there are people hating each other, people, not honoring their differences, there's, I mean, resentment literally is everywhere. When I do the little online classes, even if we've only got 20 people there, when I get everyone to do their list, their forgiveness list, and then I get them to add up how many years they've held their lists, often one individual will have 500 to 1,000 years of resentment. That's just one person. And so a room full of 20 people, that's literally 20,000 years worth of resentment in that room.
That's
And
a
so
lot.
you suddenly realize, well, maybe this is something we should be attending to in order for the world to be different. And that's why I say that I'm a global peace advocate, because I believe that if we each did our own individual work, and I realize that that's a bit of an ask, and that most people aren't going to want to do that, but if we change the culture to see that forgiveness and being able to process our way through that kind of thing is better for us and better for the world, that we could do that, that we could start creating peace instead of war. And from my point of view, nothing else really does the same job. It's like forgiveness, being able to let go of your grievance. It's a sort of almost like an art. It's a practice. It's, I call it a superpower, because when you know how to do it and you just decide, I am not going to hold any resentment against anyone for any reason because I
Mm.
choose that, then that makes you free, which is what everybody wants to be.
Yeah. And I just like to say the journey, however smooth it is meant to have its bumps. It's meant to have its ups and downs. But it's not going to be straightforward where you think it's going to be a smooth, straightforward journey.
Exactly. Exactly. And so if you know how you're going to be able to address those things, because you've got these tools and skills, then you're in a much better position to be able to face life and take big risks like you did, and,
Mm.
move countries. It's like you suddenly kind of help yourself because you're feeling more empowered.
Yeah, I agree on that. And one last question. You said about releasing songs. Will they be on iTunes or is it going to be privately sold?
No, they're everywhere. They're on iTunes, they're on Spotify. I also have a Bandcamp page, so you can actually buy them if you want to support the musician rather than the other
Okay,
big
and I'll make
companies that
sure I
push
put the
them.
links of that as well in the description. But Barbara, I'd just like to say thank you for sharing your journey with us today. I hope the message does reach those who really need it because I know peace and finding peace within oneself is always a positive, even if it's a struggle. You know you're not alone in that battle, and I just want people to know you're definitely not alone.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And also that there's a graceful way of doing it that isn't
Exactly.
agonizing and doesn't need to take decades if you
I
if you don't want it to.
I agree on that. Thank you, Barbara.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, David.
Support
Thank
the
you.
show and show your love to these amazing people. Follow their links in the description for more.
Hi, my name is Amy Harrison. I just published another book, and this is the first hard copy I've released. Let's claw right into a sneak peek. Hi, I'm my Galaxy Brat. Error. It is becoming clearer. Y'all probably think I'm annoying. Turns out they all just plain boring. I'm just being me, the realest version. Sweet on the inside, tell like it is on the outside. Yes, I embrace love, never hate. But honesty flies in my mouth like a dove. Be careful before it's too late. If you want to read more, visit the link in the description. Meow at you later.
Hi there, I'm Michael Drake, and I've written a book called The Paradox of a Mortal Mind. It's an invitation to slow down and really think about your life as a temporary part of who you are as a person. I want you to step back and think about the things, the chances that you have in life, and the relationships that you have in life, and what you value. And the book is like I said, an invitation to slow down, really think about where you are and where you want to go, and just embrace the beauty of impermanence. Embrace the fact that you will be a picture on the wall one of these days, and it's your opportunity to leave an impact on the people that you love and the community that you have. And it's really about how you make people feel at the end of the day. And so you can pick up my book anywhere on Amazon, anywhere in the world. It'll ship right to your door. It's called The Paradox of a Mortal Mind. It's by Michael Drake. And I also have a website. It's called themortalmind.com. And you can get my audiobook, my ebook, and I hope you enjoy it. And thank you very much for being here.
And I've just been listening to the Paramedic Chris children's books on audio again, and I just love it because they've given a tribute in one of them to my dad as well, who passed away a few years ago. I love audio books, and it's great to walk around, and it's great to sit at the computer, if you're out jogging or wherever, to listen to them as well. All 4 of the Paramedic Chris children's books are available on audiobook from Amazon. Go and take a listen to them. You won't be disappointed. You'll hear what happens when a community pulls together and supports one another. The best thing is to pop over to my website, paramedicchriskidsbooks.org, and you'll see the links on the shop page. Keep safe, everyone, and thank you for being you.
The Journey podcast explores stories of personal growth, challenges, and life-changing moments. Each episode dives into unique experiences, offering insights and inspiration for listeners navigating their own paths. I believe everyone has a story worth sharing. If you'd like to share your journey with David and others, email your story to wisewords1983@reborn.com, and it may be featured in a future episode.